Good evening, all of you. Welcome to One Sarkari. So let's start our today's discussion for 20th of December. So firstly, we see that COP15 summit, it adopts historic biodiversity deal. And yesterday only we discussed about the COP15 summit. So a deal has been achieved and it is known as the kunning Montreal Agreement, which is aimed at saving the lands, oceans, and species from pollution, degradation, and climate change. So basically, it focuses upon the conservation of biodiversity. So we see that there is a 30 by 30 goal, which means a pledge to protect 30% of the world's land and seas by 2030. Then, secondly, it talks about the indigenous rights. So these are basically safeguarding the indigenous people's right to remain stewards of land they use and ensuring they are not subject to mass evictions. Talking about the finance, so the text approves the objective of rich countries to provide at least $20 billion per year by 2025 and at least $30 billion per year by 2030. So also it creates a trust fund within an existing financial mechanism, which is called the Global Environment Facility, as a stepping stone to a new fund in the future. So these are, we can say, the major developments. And we also see that the monitored wildlife populations, they have seen a devastating 69% drop on average since 1970, according to the Living Planet Report 2022, which is published by the Worldwide Fund. And talking about the targets, so targets, definitely they should be ambitious, but at the same time they must be realistic and practical so that we are able to achieve them and see the changes on the ground. So that is, we can say, one of the major outcomes out of COP15. And so here we should be knowing that COP15, firstly, it is being held under the Convention on Biological Diversity. And recently also we saw that COP27, which was held under the United Nations Framework Convention to combat climate change, it was being held in Egypt. So basically these two conventions, they are the origins of the Rio Earth Summit, which was held in 1992, and you can find out more details about these conventions and if there are any other conventions that were signed under this summit in 1992 or not. So that remains your homework, and it is obviously it is to be seen whether we have any tangible outcomes out of this agreement that we have signed, and how do we ensure that we meet the targets that we have pledged to. And this has been seen on the same lines as the Paris Agreement, which was obviously signed under the UNFCCC convention. So that is there. And talking about what are the reforms that are needed when we talk about the POCSO Act. So we have discussed this point before also, so I'm just repeating it again. So an amendment needs to be considered to the POCSO Act and the Indian Penal Code to decriminalize consensual acts involving adolescents above 16 years, basically adolescents falling between 16 to 18 years who are in consensual relationships. And also at the same time, we need to ensure that those between 16 to 18, they are protected against the non-consensual acts, basically any kind of abuse. So we need to ensure both these things. So basically the new point or the new reform that we're talking about here is that we need to ensure the protection of the rights of adolescents who are above 16 and below 18, but who are in consensual relationships. So we need to decriminalize the consensual relationships falling between this age group. And obviously there is currently the blanket criminalization of the consensual sexual acts among or with the adolescents is in gross oversight of their sexual development and bodily integrity and autonomy. So that is there. Until such a reform is like discussed and implemented with. So till that time, the law enforcement agencies, the child welfare committees, and the juvenile justice boards, they may consider exercising the discretion available to them under the existing provisions in the best interest of children. So that is one reform that again it is being emphasized again and again. And obviously we discussed this before also. And talking about the minimum tax on big businesses, so recently the members of European Union, they agreed in principle to implement a minimum tax of 15% on big businesses. So what is it? Basically, it has been come up and implemented or agreed to in accordance with Pillar 2 of the Global Tax Agreement, which is framed by OECD, that is Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. And under OECD's plan, the governments, they will be equipped to impose additional taxes in case the companies, they are found to be paying taxes that are considered low according to these countries or these respective jurisdictions. And what is the need for a global minimum tax? So corporate tax rates across the world, they have been dropping over the last few decades as a result of competition between the governments to spur economic growth through greater private investments. So this is one competition that is going on to achieve a lesser and lesser amount of corporate tax, and the global corporate tax rates, they have fallen from over 40% in 1980s to under 25% in 2020. So that is the case, and OECD's tax plan tries to put an end to this race to the bottom, and that's why the European Union countries, they are coming up with this minimum tax rate of 15% for the big companies. And then what is basically what are the benefits that we are expecting out of it? So it will end the global race to the bottom and help the governments collect the revenues required for social spending. Then many people also believe that the plan will also help counter rising global inequality by making it tougher for the large businesses to pay low taxes by availing the services of tax havens. So that is also going to be one of the benefits, basically countering, or we can say it will help in reducing the growing global inequalities. And so that is, we can say, one of the developments. And talking about in detail about the carbon markets and how do they operate and what are the recent developments as far as the carbon markets are concerned in India. So recently the parliament has passed the Energy Conservation Amendment Bill, and the bill empowers the government to establish carbon markets in India and specify a carbon credit trading scheme. So, what actually are carbon markets? So, under Article 6 of 2015 Paris Agreement, it provides for the use of international carbon markets by countries to fulfill their nationally determined contributions to keep the global warming within 2 degrees Celsius. And carbon markets, they are essentially a tool for putting a price on the carbon emissions, and they establish trading systems where the carbon credits or allowances, they can be bought and sold. So a carbon credit, it's a kind of a tradable permit that, as per the United Nations standards, equals 1 ton of the carbon dioxide removed, reduced, or sequestered from the atmosphere. Sequestered, basically we can say they are stored in a way. And basically carbon certificates, they are exchanged, and so it is exchanged between two parties. So we'll be discussing how they are exchanged and what actually it means. So there are basically two broader types of carbon markets that exist today. The first one is the compliance market, and secondly, the voluntary markets. So voluntary markets, they are those in which the emitters, basically the corporations, the private individuals and others, you can say basically manufacturers, they buy the carbon credits to offset the emission of 1 ton of carbon dioxide or an equivalent greenhouse gas. So such, we can say, producers, they buy the carbon credits because they had obviously led to so much of emissions of the greenhouse gases, and they're contributing to the rising impact of global warming. So as to offset this increase in emissions of these greenhouse gases, such producers, they buy the carbon credits by paying a monetary amount to, we can say, an entity who has been successful in reducing its carbon emissions. So that is basically, we can say, the idea behind a carbon market and its functioning. And when we talk about the voluntary market, so a corporation looking to compensate for its unavoidable emissions purchases the carbon credits from an entity who's engaged in projects that reduce or remove or capture or avoid the emissions. So that is, we can say, on voluntary basis. And for instance, in the aviation sector, obviously, airlines, they may purchase the carbon credits to offset the carbon footprint of the flights they operate. So that is one example, and I hope that these two types of carbon markets are clear to you. In talking about the challenges, so UNDP points out serious concerns pertaining to carbon markets, ranging from double counting of the greenhouse gases reductions, second, quality and authenticity of the climate projects that generate credits, to poor market transparency. And obviously, there are concerns about greenwashing. So basically, under greenwashing, the entities, they try to portray a picture that they have taken steps, or they are taking certain steps, they are involved in certain projects where they are trying to reduce the carbon emissions, but actually, we can say they are a kind of brainwashing the people's mind into accepting that they are taking certain steps, but actually they are not involved in such activities. So basically, that's why it is named as greenwashing. So basically, the definition that has been provided here is that companies, they may buy the credits simply offsetting the carbon footprints instead of reducing their overall emissions. So that is also in a way, but I try to explain it to you in a very simple language, and I hope that's clear. Then, what are the concerns about the bill that has been passed by the parliament? So opposition members, they have highlighted that the bill, it does not provide clarity on the mechanism to be used for the trading of the carbon credit certificates, and secondly, who is going to regulate such trading. And there's also one more concern, that which is the right ministry to deal with carbon markets. And right now, the bill, it was, we can say, presented by the power ministry. So these are, we can say, three concerns. And also, the fourth concern or the issue is that whether the current certificates, which is the renewable energy certificates and the energy savings certificates, whether are they applicable under this new, basically the new, we can say, the, are they applicable for exchange or trading in the carbon markets or not. So that is also one of the questions. And these are all the developments that we should be knowing and understanding. Talking about the B.R. Ambedkar's idea about moral democracy, and he's basically linking morality with democracy. So, what is Ambedkar's discourse on democracy? Talking about the essence of democracy, Ambedkar's last work was Buddha and his Dhamma. So that sheds light on how he understood democracy as a concept that affected every aspect of human life. It was essentially a way of life, according to B.R. Ambedkar. And Buddha, Kabir, and Mahatma Phule's philosophies, they played an important role in Ambedkar's own engagement with democracy. So while the pillars of democracy, they are equality, liberty, and fraternity, it needs to be looked at through a moral lens as well. So that is, we can say, B.R. Ambedkar has been emphasizing on the moral aspect of democracy, and he believed that there needed to be a balance between individualism and fraternity for a harmonious society. And he gave utmost importance to practicality, also rationality and critical reasoning to analyze any subject matter. So again, everything boils down to logical thinking and rationality, and he used the lens of morality in investigating even the caste system, the Hindu social system, and the nature of religion and Indian history. Then, types of morality. So, he divided morality into social morality and constitutional morality. So, he explains that social morality, it was built through interaction, and such interaction was based on the mutual recognition of human beings. So, that is, we can say, social morality. So, it was based on equality among human beings and a recognition of respect. And talking about the constitutional morality, it was a prerequisite to maintaining a system of democracy in a country. So that is, we can say, their respective importance. And he also believed that only through a negation of hereditary rule, laws that represented all people with people's representatives, and a state which has the confidence of the people, can democracy be maintained. So here we can say the role of people is important, their rights, their entitlements, and ensuring justice is very important in maintaining a healthy democracy. And one single person or political party absolutely cannot represent the needs or will of all the people. Then the traditional caste structure was of a hierarchical rule with no mutual respect among individuals and complete subjugation of one group by another. So it does not fit into Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's idea. And also, he attempted to bring the democratic processes of Buddhism into the discourse of modern democracy. So, according to him, Buddhist sanghas, they were spaces where debates, discussions, and dissent were encouraged. Moreover, the practice of voting, which they called as Salpatraka Grahakas, began in sanghas, laying down moral grounds or principles of social freedom and public reason. So he's again emphasized on the element of Buddhism and democracy, and also emphasizing the basically respecting dissent in democracy. Then we can say that thus Ambedkar's conceptualization of moral democracy rejects the traditional caste-based religion. So that's all, and this is one of the most important articles. So you need to pause the video and go through this once again on your own. And let's move ahead. So we see 8% annual rise in notes circulation, and we see that we have witnessed an increase of 8%, and they now stand at approximately 32 lakh crore rupees as of 2nd December 2022. So the demand for currency depended upon several macroeconomic factors, including economic growth and the level of interest rates, and also upon inflation. And the Lok Sabha passed a bill to grant the ST status, that is scheduled tribe status, to the tribe Betta Kurba. Betta Kurba, so it belongs to the state of Karnataka. You should be knowing this. And let's move ahead. Okay, so here, a small development that the anti-maritime piracy bill that has been passed by the Lok Sabha, it will bring the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea into domestic law, and it will enable Indian authorities to take action against piracy on the high seas. Basically, high seas are those regions which extend beyond the exclusive economic zone of a country. And we can say, how do we define an exclusive economic zone? So that is, we can say, an area or basically extending 200 nautical miles from the coast of a country, from the shoreline, we can say. So that is one of the small developments. Then talking about the business page. So here the member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, says that monetary policy is hostage to vegetable prices. So, fluctuations in vegetable prices and changes in monetary policy, she's talking about. And India's economic growth is likely to be subdued in the coming year, but inflation will also subside, partly due to monetary policy effects and partly due to the base effect also. And high inflation, oil prices, and capital outflows, we can say these are the major and broad challenges that we need to deal with. Also, we see that accelerating inflation driven by high vegetable prices, that is a domestic issue, and we can deal with it in a much better way. Talking about the wheat prices that have been under pressure, so we see that the wheat prices, they surged in India this year after a sudden rise in temperatures hit crop yields and the output. Then we saw a jump in the exports following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, that also pushed up the local wheat prices, and which also prompted India to order a ban on exports, because the major concern was rising inflation, and we obviously had to control the wheat prices. So that's why we banned the exports and ensure good amount of supply domestically. Then talking about the sugar industry, so sugar exports, they may touch 15 lakh tons by the end of December, and all major sugar producing states, they have been seeing high production so far this season. So good performance as far as the sugar industry is concerned. Let's take a Financial Express now. So in Financial Express, so if somebody asks you, what is your definition of good governance? So in very short and simple language, your answer can be that when the benefits, they reach the remotest citizen living in the remotest village of India, can be your idea of good governance. Then talking about doubling the farmer's income and failing in achieving this target, basically because of non-implementation of the reforms, we see that farmers' income, it has seen rising 70% in 7 years. And a member of Niti Aayog, that is Sir Ramesh Chand, he says that it is because of the non-implementation of the farm reforms such as the Model Agriculture Produce Marketing Act, Livestock Marketing Act, and the Land Leasing Act. So when we talk about some well-performing and good performing states who can meet this target of doubling the farmers' income includes Andhra Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh. And the target included increasing or doubling the average farmer's agriculture-based income from rupees approximately, we can say 58,000 in 2015-16 to rupees 100 to rupees 1,16,000 and 165 rupees by 2022-23. So that was the target, and states, they have failed to implement meaningful reforms in the farm sector, given agriculture is the state subject. And taking the example, center, it was trying to persuade the states to enact a model of APMC Act to keep the fruits and vegetables out of the purview of the mandis, abolition of the Arthia Commission, and permission for hassle-free interstate trade. So these reforms are missing. And if you want to achieve the target of doubling the farmer's income, obviously this is going to take more time, but we need to ensure timely implementation of these reforms that we just discussed. And then we have one more thing to discuss today. Okay, so it is about net energy gain related to nuclear fusion. So we see that the recent news of net energy gain, which means more energy produced by the fusion reaction that used in than used in precipitating it for the first time ever, and it has fueled excitement across the world. So basically, nuclear fusion, it occurs when two or more atomic nuclei comprising protons and neutrons, they combine to form new types of atomic nuclei, and inside sun and other stars, even they are powered by the nuclear fusion reactions. So you should be knowing that, and you should be knowing about the net energy gain that we saw as a result out of one of the experiments being done by US. And one of the benefits out of it can be that 1 kg of the fusion fuel can theoretically, it can replace 55,000 barrels of oil and 10,000 tons of coal. So that is, we can say, huge benefit that we can have out of it. And the researchers, they used a mixture of deuterium and tritium, which are the two variants of hydrogen. So deuterium, it has 1 proton and 1 neutron, and tritium, it has 1 proton and 2 neutrons. So in the fusion reaction, both of these, they combined to form a helium nucleus, leading to 2 protons and 2 neutrons, and there was 1 neutron with the release of energy. So that is, we can say that was the reaction that was done at the National Ignition Facility in US. And that's all for today. Thank you for joining Ansarkari. I hope you've understood new things and the concepts that we discussed. And you'll find the PDF link in the description box below. And yeah, see you tomorrow. Till then, keep working hard.